I thought the hardest part about moving into my new townhouse would be unpacking boxes by myself. Turns out I couldn't have been more wrong, because 3 days after I moved in, the quiet single dad next door knocked on my door holding a broken stroller in one hand and a sleepy little girl on his hip. That simple knock completely changed my life. My name is Henry, I'm 28, and until recently, I lived a very predictable life. I worked remotely as a graphic designer, spent too much money on coffee, and preferred quiet evenings over crowded bars. After a rough breakup the previous year, I wasn't looking for anything serious. Honestly, I wasn't looking for anyone at all. The townhouse community seemed perfect for starting over. Small, peaceful, mostly young families or older couples. Exactly the kind of place where nobody bothered anyone. The only person I kept noticing was the man living next door. His name, I would later learn, was Nicholas. At first, he was just the quiet neighbor, tall, dark brown hair that always looked slightly messy, broad shoulders hidden beneath plain t shirts. He wasn't flashy or loud. If anything, he looked permanently exhausted. Every morning around 7, I'd see him loading a tiny girl into the back seat of a silver SUV before driving away. Every evening, he'd come home carrying groceries, backpacks, toys, and sometimes a child who had clearly fallen asleep before reaching the front door. He never seemed to stop moving. I guessed he was somewhere in his mid-30s, older than me, but not by much. One Saturday afternoon, I was assembling shelves in my living room when someone knocked. I opened the door. There he was. Up close, Nicholas somehow looked even more tired than usual. There were faint circles beneath his eyes, and his gray t-shirt had a streak of what looked suspiciously like strawberry yogurt near one shoulder. Balanced against one hip was his daughter, maybe 4 years old, hugging a stuffed rabbit while blinking sleepily at me. In Nicholas's other hand was a stroller with one wheel hanging sideways. "Hey," he said with an embarrassed smile. "Sorry to bother you." "No problem." He scratched the back of his neck. "I noticed you've got tools in your garage." I looked past him. He'd apparently noticed the toolbox I'd been unpacking earlier. I was wondering. He lifted the stroller slightly. "Any chance you're good with fixing things?" I laughed. "Depends how broken." He turned the stroller around. The front wheel practically fell off. "Okay," I admitted. "That's pretty broken." His shoulders slumped. "I figured." The little girl suddenly looked at me. "Daddy broke it." Nicholas sighed dramatically. "Thank you for the support, Emma. I told you not to go too fast." I was avoiding a squirrel. It was tiny. It was determined. I couldn't help smiling. The entire conversation felt so normal, comfortable. "I can take a look," I offered. "You sure?" "Yeah." Relief washed across his face immediately. "I seriously owe you." "You don't owe me anything." 10 minutes later, the stroller sat upside down in my garage while Emma colored with sidewalk chalk on the driveway. Nicholas crouched beside me holding a flashlight. I swear this thing waits until life gets hectic before falling apart. "When's the last time you replaced the wheel?" He hesitated. "Never?" I raised an eyebrow. "It's only 4 years old." "Exactly." He laughed quietly. "I deserved that." While I worked, conversation came surprisingly easily. He worked as a physical therapist at a rehabilitation clinic. Emma had just started preschool. He'd been living there for almost 3 years. "You live here alone?" he asked. "Yeah." "You just move in?" "Last week?" He nodded. "Welcome to Maple Grove." I tightened one last bolt before spinning the wheel. It turned perfectly. "There." Nicholas tested it himself. His eyebrows shot up. "You actually fixed it." "I told you I'd try." He looked genuinely impressed. "I've watched 3 YouTube tutorials." "That's because YouTube doesn't have me." He laughed. A real laugh this time. Warm, easy. It transformed his whole face. Emma looked up from her chalk drawing. "Daddy smiled." Nicholas groaned. "I smile." "No, you don't." "I absolutely do." She looked at me. "He doesn't." I bit back another laugh. Nicholas covered his face dramatically. I've been betrayed by my own child. Emma giggled. That sound somehow made the whole afternoon brighter. When they started walking back home, Nicholas paused halfway down the driveway. Henry? Yeah? Seriously, thank you. It wasn't a big deal. It was to us. There was something sincere about the way he said it. Not dramatic, just honest. That should have been the end of it. Neighbor helps neighbor. Simple. Except the next evening someone knocked again. This time Nicholas stood there holding a covered baking dish. I don't bake, he admitted immediately. So? My sister does. He held it out. She insisted I couldn't accept help without bringing food. I lifted the foil. Lasagna. It smelled incredible. I'm not saying no to this. I hoped you wouldn't. He started walking away before stopping. Oh, and Emma wanted me to tell you something. What? He smiled. She says you're officially the stroller doctor. I laughed. I'll add it to my resume. Over the next few weeks, things happened naturally, not forced, not planned, just naturally. If I was grabbing my mail, Nicholas was usually getting his at the same time. If I mowed my lawn, he'd wave while chasing Emma across theirs. Sometimes we'd end up talking for 20 minutes without realizing it. Little conversations. Nothing important. Everything important. One evening I found him sitting alone on his front steps after Emma had gone to bed. He looked unusually quiet. You okay? I asked. He forced a smile. Long day. I sat on the step beside him. Neither of us spoke for almost a minute. Finally, he said quietly, Can I ask you something kind of weird? Sure. He looked down at his hands. Would you maybe be willing to help me with something this weekend? I shrugged. Probably. He exhaled slowly. I need to clean out my garage. I blinked. That's the favor? He laughed awkwardly. Not exactly. His smile faded. My wife used to organize everything. The words hung in the evening air. I haven't touched most of it since she passed. I didn't know what to say. He stared toward the driveway. I keep telling myself I'll deal with it. Another pause. I just can't seem to do it alone. I looked over at him. For the first time since meeting him. The exhaustion in his face suddenly made perfect sense. The next Saturday morning, I walked across the lawn carrying 2 coffees and a pair of work gloves. Nicholas was already standing in front of his garage, staring at the closed door like it might bite him. You almost look nervous, I joked. He accepted the coffee with a tired smile. I've been standing here for 10 minutes trying to convince myself to open it. You don't have to do everything today. I know. He looked at the garage door opener in his hand. But if I don't start now, another year will disappear. He pressed the button. The garage door slowly rattled upward. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Shelves, storage bins, a bicycle, boxes stacked neatly against one wall. Then I noticed something. Every single box had the same handwriting. Elegant black marker. Christmas decorations. Emma. Baby clothes. Kitchen. Sarah's office. Nicholas noticed me looking. She labeled everything. His voice stayed calm, but it sounded practiced, like he'd repeated that sentence to himself 100 times. I couldn't bring myself to change any of it. I nodded. Hey, we'll go one box at a time. He smiled faintly. That's probably better than trying to survive all of them at once. For the first hour, we barely talked. We sorted old camping gear, recycled broken toys, moved furniture toward the curb. The silence never felt awkward. It felt respectful. Around noon, Emma came running outside wearing bright yellow rain boots despite the cloudless sky. I'm helping, Nicholas laughed. You are? She proudly held up a tiny broom. I sweep. Best job in the garage. She immediately got to work, sweeping the exact same patch of concrete over and over with complete determination. I leaned toward Nicholas. I think she's carrying this project. She's definitely the hardest worker here. Emma looked up. I heard that. So did I. She grinned before returning to her important work. An hour later, Nicholas opened a cardboard box and froze. Inside were dozens of framed photographs. He didn't move, didn't speak. I quietly stepped away, pretending to organize another shelf. After nearly a minute, he finally picked up one picture. It showed him several years younger, his arm wrapped around a smiling blonde woman, while baby Emma sat between them wearing an oversized birthday hat. Nicholas stared at it for a long time. She hated having her picture taken. I looked over, but she smiled at everyone, because Emma always made her laugh. His thumb brushed lightly across the glass. I keep worrying. He stopped himself. Worrying about what? He swallowed. That Emma will forget her. I didn't answer immediately, because there wasn't a perfect answer. Instead, I said quietly, "Does she still talk about her?" "Every day." "Then she hasn't forgotten." He nodded slowly. "I know. But someday." His voice cracked just enough that he stopped talking altogether. A small voice interrupted us. "Daddy?" Emma stood nearby, holding another photograph. "This mommy?" Nicholas looked over. His entire expression softened. "Yeah, sweetheart." Emma smiled at the picture. "She pretty?" "The prettiest." Emma carefully placed the frame back inside the box. "We keep." Nicholas blinked rapidly before nodding. "We definitely keep." She hugged his leg without another word. Watching the two of them together made something tighten in my chest. Not because it was sad, because it was beautiful. The kind of love that kept going even after unimaginable loss. Later that afternoon, after Emma went inside for a snack, Nicholas and I sat on overturned storage bins, drinking lemonade. "You've been alone a long time?" he asked. I shrugged. "A little over a year." He nodded. "Bad breakup?" "Yeah." "What happened?" I laughed softly. "He wanted a completely different life." Nicholas waited. "He wanted to move across the country." "And you didn't." "I couldn't." He looked at me carefully. "Or wouldn't?" I considered that. "Both." He smiled. "I appreciate honest answers." "What about you?" He looked toward the house. "I haven't dated since Sarah died." "Not even once?" He shook his head. "I barely had enough energy to survive the first year." "And after that?" I convinced myself Emma needed all my attention. "You sound like you still believe that." "I do. But," he rubbed the back of his neck, "sometimes I wonder if I'm hiding behind that." I stayed quiet. He laughed awkwardly. "Sorry." "You don't have to apologize. I don't usually talk about this stuff." "Why now?" He looked directly at me. "Because talking to you feels easy." Neither of us said anything after that. The silence felt different this time. Not uncomfortable, just noticeable. Emma burst through the back door carrying popsicles. "I got orange," Nicholas smiled. "What about Henry?" She gasped dramatically. "I forgot." She sprinted back inside. Nicholas chuckled. "She's going to feel guilty for at least 6 minutes." "That's very specific." "I know my daughter." Sure enough, 30 seconds later she returned carrying two popsicles. One orange, one blue. "You choose first." I accepted the blue one. "Thanks." She smiled proudly. "Daddy says sharing is important." "He sounds smart." She nodded seriously. "He mostly is." Nicholas laughed so hard he nearly dropped his drink. That evening, after we'd finally finished cleaning the garage, it looked twice as big. Nicholas slowly looked around the empty space. "I forgot it could actually fit a car." "You earned that parking spot." He looked at me for a long moment. "I couldn't have done this alone." "You would have." "Eventually." He shook his head. "No." "I would have closed the door again." Before I could respond, Emma tugged on my sleeve. "Henry?" "Yeah?" She held up a crayon drawing. 3 stick figures. One was obviously Nicholas. One tiny one with yellow hair. The third had messy brown hair. Me. Look, I smiled. It looks great. She pointed proudly. Family. The word hit both of us at exactly the same time. Nicholas's smile disappeared. Emma noticed immediately. I mean, she frowned. Neighbor family. Nicholas crouched beside her. I know what you meant. She looked worried. Bad? No. He kissed the top of her head. Not bad. She ran back inside. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, Nicholas let out a quiet breath. Kids don't realize how powerful simple words can be. No, they really don't. As I started walking home, he called after me. Henry? I turned around. Would you... He hesitated. Would you and I maybe have dinner sometime? I smiled. I thought we already had. He looked confused. The lasagna. He laughed. No. I mean, just then Emma shouted from inside the house. Daddy, Aunt Lisa's calling. Nicholas looked toward the door before looking back at me. I'll explain later. Then he disappeared inside, leaving me standing in the driveway wondering exactly what he'd been about to ask. For the next 2 days, I couldn't stop thinking about what Nicholas had almost asked me. It wasn't because I assumed it was romantic. Honestly, I told myself it probably wasn't. He was a widower, a father. Maybe he'd wanted to thank me with dinner. Maybe he wanted to ask for another favor. Maybe I was reading way too much into one awkward sentence. Still, every time I saw him outside, that unfinished conversation lingered between us. Wednesday evening, I came home carrying groceries and nearly walked into Emma. She was sitting on my front porch, alone, drawing with sidewalk chalk. Hey, she looked up. Hi, Henry. Everything okay? She nodded. Daddy talking. I looked toward Nicholas's house. His front door was slightly open. Inside, I could hear raised voices, not yelling, just tense. Emma must have noticed me listening. Aunt Lisa? Oh, they talking loud. I sat beside her on the porch. You waiting out here? She nodded again. I don't like when grown-ups get sad. That sentence hurt more than I expected. A few minutes later, Nicholas stepped outside. The moment he saw Emma, his expression softened. There you are. She immediately hugged him. You done? He smiled. Yeah. She looked up at him carefully. You okay? I'm okay. Children always seem to know when adults weren't telling the whole truth. Emma simply nodded. Okay. Then she spotted the grocery bags beside me. You got ice cream? I laughed. How did you know? You always buy Wednesday ice cream. I blinked. I do? She looked at me like it was obvious. Every Wednesday? I hadn't even realized. Nicholas chuckled. She's observant. Apparently. Emma smiled proudly. I remember stuff. I can tell. Nicholas hesitated before speaking again. Henry. Yeah? You still free Friday night? For what? He rubbed the back of his neck. I never finished asking. I smiled. No, you didn't. He laughed quietly. I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner. Just the two of us. There it was. Simple. Straightforward. My heart somehow sped up anyway. I'd like that. His shoulders relaxed immediately. Good. Daddy? Emma tugged on his shirt. Can Henry come here? Nicholas smiled. I think that's the idea. She clapped excitedly. I make dessert. Nicholas and I exchanged amused looks. I'm suddenly terrified. You should be. Friday arrived much slower than it should have. Around 6, I walked next door carrying a bottle of sparkling cider. The front door opened before I could knock. Emma stood there wearing a tiny apron covered in flour. We cooking. I can see that. She grabbed my hand. Come. Nicholas appeared from the kitchen. I apologized in advance. For what? He gestured around the room. Flour covered half the countertops. There were mixing bowls everywhere. Chocolate somehow decorated one cabinet door. Emma looked very pleased with herself. We baked. Nicholas leaned toward me. I think we survived. I heard that. Emma crossed her arms dramatically. I good helper. You were the best helper. She accepted the compliment immediately. Dinner turned out surprisingly wonderful. Homemade pasta, garlic bread, salad. Conversation flowed easily, mostly because Emma insisted on telling me every single thing that had happened during preschool that week. And then Oliver cried. Oh? He dropped Cookie? Nicholas nodded sympathetically. That was apparently the tragedy of the day. Emma looked offended. It big Cookie. I'm sorry. She accepted my apology. Later, after dessert, which was slightly misshapen but delicious, Emma yawned so dramatically that Nicholas laughed. Someone's bedtime is here. No. Yes. No. He picked her up anyway. She wrapped both arms around his neck before looking at me. You stay? If your dad lets me. She smiled sleepily. Good. 10 minutes later, Nicholas returned downstairs looking noticeably more relaxed. She out? Completely. He collapsed onto the couch. I swear parenting is 90% convincing tiny people to sleep. I wouldn't know. He laughed. Fair. The house suddenly felt very quiet, for the first time since we'd met. It was just the two of us. He glanced toward the hallway to make sure Emma was asleep. Then he looked back at me. I should probably explain Wednesday. You don't have to. I want to. I nodded. My sister thinks I should start dating again. I stayed quiet. I've been avoiding the conversation for months. What do you think? He stared at his hands. I think... He searched for the right words. I forgot how. You don't forget. You'd be surprised. He smiled without looking up. I was with Sarah for 12 years. 12? We met in college. He laughed softly. I never imagined I'd have to learn how to be alone. There was something painfully honest about the way he said it. I still talk to her sometimes. I looked at him. What do you mean? When Emma's asleep. He shrugged awkwardly. I'll sit on the porch. And? I tell Sarah about our day. He smiled sadly. Emma lost another tooth. She learned to ride her bike. She hates broccoli. His eyes became distant. I know she can't answer. But somehow, it helps. I understood that. More than he probably realized. You loved her. I still do. He looked at me carefully. I don't think love disappears. No. I think... He paused. It just makes room. Neither of us spoke. A soft breeze drifted through the open kitchen window. Finally, he asked quietly, Can I ask you something personal? Sure. When did you know? I frowned. Know what? That you were gay. The question wasn't judgmental, just curious. I thought about it. I was 14. Were you scared? Terrified? He nodded slowly. My parents weren't exactly accepting. I'm sorry. They came around. Eventually. He smiled faintly. What about you? My family? No. You. He looked confused. I've never asked. Asked what? If you're seeing anyone. I laughed. I'm not. No dates? No. Why? I shrugged. I've been busy. That's your official answer? It's also the true one. He looked unconvinced. I think there's another reason. I smiled. You analyze people for a living. Physical therapist. Still counts. He laughed. Fair. Our eyes met. For a second, neither of us looked away. Then a tiny voice drifted down the hallway. Daddy? Nicholas stood immediately. Coming, sweetheart. He disappeared upstairs. I sat alone in the living room, smiling to myself. A few minutes later, I heard Emma's sleepy voice. Daddy. Yeah? I like Henry. There was a pause. So do I. I wasn't sure Nicholas realized I'd heard him. But somehow, those 3 simple words stayed with me the entire walk home. After that dinner, something shifted between Nicholas and me. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just enough that I noticed. Instead of waving from across the driveway, he'd walk over. Instead of talking for 5 minutes, we'd somehow end up talking for 30. And somehow, almost without planning it, I became part of their routine. On Tuesday evenings, Emma would knock on my door asking if I wanted to help build blanket forts. Thursday afternoons, Nicholas and I would drink coffee on the porch while Emma played with bubbles in the yard. Saturday mornings became pancake mornings. At first, I told myself I was just being a good neighbor. Then one afternoon, my sister called. So, I frowned. So what? You've been smiling through this entire phone call. I have not. You absolutely have. I rolled my eyes. You're imagining things. What's his name? That made me laugh. Why do you assume there's a him? Because I know my brother. I leaned back in my porch chair. His name's Nicholas. I knew it. You knew nothing. She ignored me. Tell me everything. So I did. About Emma, about the garage, about dinners, about coffee on the porch, about how easy everything felt. She stayed unusually quiet. Finally, she asked, Do you like him? I stared across the yard. Nicholas was helping Emma learn to throw a frisbee. Every time she missed, he'd cheer anyway. The answer should have been simple. Instead, it felt complicated. I don't know. My sister laughed softly. Henry? What? You just spent 10 minutes talking about one man? So? And half of it wasn't even about him. I frowned. What do you mean? You kept talking about how kind he is with his daughter. I watched Nicholas kneel down to tie Emma's untied shoe. I guess? No. You admire him. Those words stayed with me long after we hung up. A week later, Nicholas knocked on my door looking stressed. I need another favor, I smiled. What's broken this time? My confidence. That sounds expensive, he laughed despite himself. The preschool is having a family picnic tomorrow. Okay. They're doing a 3-legged race. I waited. I need a partner. I blinked. You want me to race? Unless you've got someone faster hidden in your house. I don't think I'm the obvious choice. You were Emma's first choice. That immediately ruined every excuse I'd been preparing. What did she say? Nicholas smiled. She said... He cleared his throat dramatically. Henry doesn't fall down as much as you do, Daddy. I laughed so hard I had to grab the doorframe. She's savage. She's 4. Worse. So? He looked hopeful. You'll come? Of course. The next afternoon, the preschool playground was filled with families. Kids ran everywhere. Parents carried folding chairs. Someone had already burned the hot dogs. Emma spotted me almost immediately. Henry! She sprinted across the grass and hugged my waist. You came. I said I would. She took my hand and practically dragged me toward Nicholas. He looked different. Instead of his usual jeans and t-shirt, he wore athletic shorts and a navy polo. It was surprisingly distracting. You made it. I wouldn't miss seeing you lose. Oh, that's confidence. I believe in honesty. He smiled. I like that about you. Before I could answer, one of the teachers announced the races. Emma clapped excitedly. Daddy, Henry, win. Nicholas leaned toward me. No pressure. The race itself was ridiculous. Half the parents fell over before reaching the halfway point. Nicholas and I actually managed to stay upright, mostly because every time I stumbled, he'd catch my arm. Every time he lost balance, I'd steady him. We crossed the finish line second. Emma celebrated like we'd won the Olympics. My team! She threw both arms around us. One around me, one around Nicholas. Parents nearby smiled at the sight. One older woman walked over. There you boys are. Nicholas smiled politely. Hi. She looked between us. You two make such a lovely couple. Time froze. Nicholas opened his mouth, closed it. Wasn't sure what to say either. Before either of us could respond, Emma smiled proudly. They're my grown-ups. The woman melted. Oh, sweetheart. She walked away before either of us managed to explain anything. Nicholas rubbed the back of his neck. That happens more than you'd think. It does? He nodded. People assume. Does it bother you? He thought for a moment. Not as much as it used to. I wasn't sure why that answer made my heart beat faster. Later, while Emma played on the swings with her classmates, Nicholas and I sat on a picnic blanket. You okay? I asked. You've asked me that a lot lately. You don't have to answer, he smiled. I've just been thinking. About? He watched Emma laughing in the distance. I worry she's getting attached. To me? He nodded. I don't want anyone disappearing from her life again. The words landed heavily between us. I don't plan on disappearing. I know. He looked at me. But life changes. So does friendship. I've learned not to assume anything lasts forever. I understood why he felt that way, but hearing it still hurt. I can't promise the future. He nodded. I know. But I can promise I'm not going anywhere because things get complicated. His eyes searched mine. You mean that? I do. For several long seconds, neither of us looked away. Then Emma shouted from across the playground. Daddy! Nicholas stood. I'm coming. He started jogging toward her. Halfway there, she pointed back at me. Henry, too! Nicholas looked over his shoulder. You coming? I smiled. Always. For reasons I couldn't explain. That single word felt much bigger than either of us was ready to admit. Summer slowly gave way to early autumn. The mornings became cooler. Leaves started collecting along the sidewalks. Without either of us noticing, spending time together stopped feeling like making plans. It simply became part of life. Some evenings, Nicholas would text, Coffee on the porch? Other nights, I'd message him, Need anything from the grocery store? More often than not, the answer was simply, Come over. Emma's asking about you. One Friday evening, I found them baking cookies, or at least attempting to. Emma stood on a chair wearing another flour-covered apron. Nicholas looked like he'd survived a small explosion. There you are, he said. You sound relieved. I've been decorating cookies for 45 minutes. Emma held up one completely covered in rainbow sprinkles. Pretty. It definitely has personality. Nicholas laughed. That's the nicest thing anyone said about these. I rolled up my sleeves. Move over. You bake? I learned from my grandmother. Emma gasped dramatically. Henry Magic? Nicholas grinned. We're about to find out. An hour later, the kitchen looked even messier, but the cookies actually resembled cookies. Emma proudly arranged them on a plate. We take some to Mrs. Harper. The lady across the street? I asked. She nodded. She lonely. Nicholas smiled at his daughter. That was your idea. Emma shrugged like it wasn't a big deal. People need cookies, I laughed. Hard to argue with that. Nicholas looked at me. She gets that from her mom. What? Always noticing people. He smiled softly. Sarah couldn't walk past someone having a bad day without trying to help. There was sadness in his voice, but this time, there was gratitude too, like remembering no longer hurt quite as sharply. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, we sat on the back patio watching the neighborhood grow quiet. Nicholas leaned back in his chair. You ever think life turns out completely differently than you expected? Every day. I used to have everything planned. He looked toward the stars. Marriage, kids, the same house forever. He smiled faintly. I thought I knew exactly what 50 would look like. And now? I don't even know what next month looks like. I understood that feeling. I used to think I'd have someone too. He looked at me. What happened? My ex. What? I took a slow breath. He never really accepted that I wanted something stable. You did? I still do. I smiled to myself. I always imagined a quiet home. A garden. Maybe a dog. He laughed. Very specific. I've had years to think about it. He looked thoughtful. You'd make a good dad. The words caught me completely off guard. What makes you say that? I watch you with Emma. He shrugged. You never pretend. You actually listen to her. Most adults don't. I looked down. I like kids. I know? No. He smiled. You love her. I didn't answer immediately, because he was right. Somewhere along the way, I'd fallen in love with that little girl, not instead of Nicholas, alongside him. I do. Nicholas looked down at his hands. She loves you too. Neither of us spoke after that. The following Tuesday, everything changed. I came home from work just after 5. Nicholas's SUV wasn't in the driveway. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was seeing his sister Lisa standing on his porch. The moment she spotted me, she hurried over. Henry. My stomach tightened. What's wrong? It's Emma. Every terrible possibility hit me at once. What happened? She's okay, Lisa quickly added. She fell off the monkey bars. They're keeping her overnight for observation because she hit her head. I let out the breath I'd been holding. And Nicholas? At the hospital. I didn't even finish the sentence. Lisa smiled. He'd probably like that. The children's hospital was quieter than I expected. I found Nicholas sitting outside Emma's room, still wearing the same clothes from work. His elbows rested on his knees. He looked exhausted. When he saw me, something in his expression immediately softened. You came. Of course. He stood without thinking. He hugged me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't romantic. It was simply the hug of someone who'd been trying to stay strong all day. I hugged him back. It's okay. He pulled away after a moment. Sorry. You don't ever have to apologize. He rubbed his eyes. I got so scared. I know. They said she's fine. But when they called, his voice cracked. I thought... He couldn't finish. I rested a hand on his shoulder. You don't have to say it. He nodded gratefully. A nurse stepped into the hallway. Emma's awake. Nicholas immediately smiled. Can we go in? She keeps asking for both of you. Both. The word made me blink. Inside the room, Emma looked tiny in the hospital bed. The moment she saw us, she smiled. Daddy. Nicholas kissed her forehead. Hey, bug. Then she looked at me. You came too. I promised I wouldn't disappear. She smiled sleepily. I remembered. Nicholas looked at me. Our eyes met across the room. Neither of us said anything. But somehow, we didn't need to. Emma was discharged the next morning. The doctor ordered several days of rest, which meant Nicholas had to stay home from work. Unfortunately, his clinic was desperately understaffed. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, he admitted while making breakfast. I've already missed 2 days this month. I thought for a second. I work from home. He frowned. So? I can stay with Emma. His eyes widened. Henry? I'm serious. You don't have to. I know. Emma looked up from the couch. I want Henry. Nicholas laughed despite himself. I can see that. He turned back to me. You'd really do that? She's my friend. He smiled. So are you. The words were simple, but they settled warmly in my chest. For the next 3 days, I worked from Nicholas's dining room, while Emma colored beside me on the floor. She'd occasionally wander over just to show me another drawing, or ask me to read another story, or simply sit beside me in comfortable silence. On the 3rd afternoon, she looked up from her crayons. Henry? Yeah? If you live here. I smiled. I don't. You could. I blinked. She continued coloring like she'd asked the most ordinary question in the world. I glanced toward the kitchen. Nicholas had heard every word. He looked just as surprised as I felt. Neither of us knew what to say, so we simply looked at each other, while an impossible question quietly settled between us. Emma's question hung in the air long after she'd gone back to coloring. If you live here, She'd said it so casually, like she'd been asking whether I preferred pancakes or waffles. Nicholas cleared his throat. I think someone has quite an imagination. Emma looked up. I do. Then she smiled and went back to her picture. That evening, after Nicholas tucked her into bed, he found me rinsing coffee mugs in the kitchen. You didn't have to clean. I know. He leaned against the counter. About what she said, I smiled. She's 4. She notices more than people think. I dried my hands on a towel. Does it bother you? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared out the kitchen window toward the backyard. I don't know. That's honest. I've spent so long making sure Emma feels safe that I stopped asking myself what I wanted. He laughed softly. Now she's asking questions I haven't even answered. I walked over beside him. You don't have to answer them tonight. I know. He looked at me. But eventually, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. The following weekend, the neighborhood organized its annual autumn festival. There were food trucks, live music, pumpkin carving, and games for the kids. Emma insisted we all go together. You have to come, she told me over breakfast. I've already been invited? She nodded seriously. I invited you yesterday. Nicholas laughed. Apparently your attendance wasn't optional. I'll be there. She grinned triumphantly. I knew it. The park was crowded. Children ran between hay bales while parents carried cups of hot cider. Emma disappeared toward the face painting booth before either of us could stop her. Nicholas sighed. She has exactly 2 speeds. What are they? That's sleep and running. 20 minutes later, Emma returned, looking incredibly proud of herself. A tiny fox had been painted across her cheeks. What do you think? It's perfect. She looked at Nicholas. Daddy? You look amazing. She grabbed both our hands. Come. Where? Pumpkins. Before either of us could protest, she dragged us toward the decorating table. Half an hour later, my pumpkin somehow wore sunglasses. Nicholas's had a crooked smile. Emma's was covered in glitter. A masterpiece, I said. It sparkles. It definitely sparkles. She beamed. As the sun began setting, a local band started playing soft acoustic music near the gazebo. Families spread blankets across the grass. Children danced without caring who watched. Emma tugged on Nicholas's sleeve. Dance. He laughed. I don't dance. You do now. You do. She pulled harder. Finally, he gave in. The two of them spun in slow circles across the grass while Emma laughed so loudly that nearby families smiled. I couldn't stop watching them. Nicholas looked happier than I'd ever seen him. Lighter. Like for a few minutes he'd forgotten how heavy life had been. Then Emma suddenly let go of his hands. She ran straight toward me. Henry! Before I realized what was happening, she grabbed my wrist. Your turn. I don't... Please. Nicholas looked amused. I think you're outnumbered. I sighed dramatically. I've been ambushed. Emma placed one of my hands in Nicholas's. Then she stepped backward with the biggest smile on her face. There. Neither of us moved. The music continued around us. Nicholas looked just as unsure as I felt. We don't have to. I know. But neither of us let go. Slowly. Almost awkwardly. We took a few steps together. Nothing dramatic. Nothing intimate. Just enough to keep Emma happy. She clapped excitedly from the sidelines. My grown-ups are dancing! Several nearby parents smiled. One older man nodded toward us. You've got a beautiful family. This time, neither Nicholas nor I corrected him. When the song ended, Emma threw herself into both of us. Best day. Nicholas kissed the top of her head. I think you're right. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep in the back seat on the drive home, Nicholas carried her inside. I followed with blankets and her tiny backpack. Once she'd been tucked into bed, we stepped quietly back onto the front porch. The neighborhood was silent. Cold autumn air drifted between the trees. Nicholas leaned against the porch railing. I've been scared. I looked at him. Of what? He laughed quietly. That's the problem. I don't know anymore. He looked down at his hands. I was terrified after Sarah died. I was terrified of raising Emma alone. I was terrified I'd fail her. He took a slow breath. Then somewhere along the way, he looked directly at me. I stopped feeling alone. My chest tightened. You helped us. You let us help each other. He smiled sadly. Maybe. We stood in silence for several seconds. Finally, he asked, Can I tell you something without you saying anything back? I nodded. I think... He swallowed. I started looking for you. What do you mean? When something funny happens. When Emma says something ridiculous. When I have a bad day. My first thought is... He laughed softly at himself. I should tell Henry. He looked embarrassed. I don't know when that started. I smiled. It happened to me too. He looked up. I'll see something during the day, I admitted, and immediately think about telling you. Neither of us looked away. The porch suddenly felt very quiet, very small, very impossible. Nicholas took one slow step closer. So, I don't know what this is. I don't either. But I know I don't want to lose it. You won't. His eyes searched mine. You can't promise that. I can promise I'll try. He nodded. Then, very carefully, he reached for my hand, not dramatically, just enough for our fingers to touch. Neither of us moved away. For a long moment we simply stood there, hand in hand. No labels, no expectations, just two people who had somehow become incredibly important to each other. Then the baby monitor crackled. Daddy. Nicholas smiled immediately. I should go. He reluctantly let go of my hand. I'll see you tomorrow. I smiled. You'll probably see me before lunch. He laughed. I was hoping you'd say that. As I walked back across my yard, I couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in a very long time. The future didn't feel frightening. It felt possible. By the time November arrived, I couldn't remember what life had been like before Nicholas and Emma. That realization should have scared me. Instead, it felt strangely right. Every morning, Emma would wave at me from the back seat of Nicholas's SUV before preschool. Every evening, one of us somehow ended up on the other's porch with 2 mugs of coffee. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. The silence had become comfortable, the kind you only share with people who already know what you're thinking. One rainy Saturday, the power went out across the entire neighborhood. I was halfway through making lunch when everything went dark. A second later, someone knocked. I opened the door to find Emma wrapped in a blanket. Daddy says our heater stopped. Nicholas stood behind her holding a flashlight. I figured we'd check on you. I'm fine. You have a gas fireplace, right? I nodded. We do. He smiled. Mind if we hide here until the power comes back? I was hoping you'd ask. Within 20 minutes, my living room looked completely different. A fire crackled in the fireplace. Blankets covered the floor. Emma had declared the entire room a camping fort. Nicholas looked around and laughed. I think we've lost control. We never had it. Emma pointed toward us. You sit. We obeyed. She handed each of us a mug of hot chocolate she'd insisted on helping prepare. It's mostly marshmallows, Nicholas whispered. I noticed. I supervised. I also noticed. He smiled. Outside, rain tapped steadily against the windows. Inside, everything felt warm, safe. Emma eventually crawled into Nicholas's lap with a storybook. Halfway through the second chapter, her eyelids grew heavier. By the end, she was asleep. Nicholas carefully adjusted the blanket around her shoulders. I watched him quietly. She's getting bigger. He nodded. Too fast. You say that every week. Because it's true. He looked down at her sleeping face. I wish I could slow time. So does every parent. He smiled faintly. I never thought I'd be raising her with someone sitting beside me. I looked at him. You've always been raising her. You know what I mean. I did, more than he probably realized. The power still hadn't returned by evening. Emma continued sleeping peacefully on the couch. Nicholas and I stood in the kitchen preparing dinner by lantern light. This feels strangely nice, I admitted. It does. He handed me vegetables to chop. I used to hate quiet. You did? After Sarah died? He looked toward the living room. The silence in the house was unbearable. So I'd keep the television on. The radio. Anything. He smiled softly. Now. He glanced at me. I don't mind quiet anymore. I smiled. Neither do I. Dinner finished cooking just as the lights flickered back on. Emma blinked awake. We have electricity. Nicholas laughed. I think civilization has returned. She stretched dramatically before looking between us. Movie? Nicholas looked at me. What do you think? I think we owe her one. Emma chose an animated movie she'd apparently watched 100 times. She insisted on sitting between us. Halfway through, she fell asleep again, her head resting against my shoulder. Her feet draped across Nicholas's lap. Neither of us moved. Nicholas looked over at me and smiled. Comfortable? I don't think I'm allowed to move. I don't think so either. For the next hour, we simply sat there, watching a movie neither of us was really paying attention to. Later, after Nicholas carried Emma home, I started cleaning up. There was another knock. Nicholas stood outside, without Emma. I forgot something. What? He stepped inside, then laughed. I actually didn't. You just wanted to come back? He nodded. I did. We stood there smiling awkwardly. Finally, he said, I've been thinking about something. Dangerous. I know. He laughed. When Emma asked if you could live with us, I felt my heartbeat quicken. I told myself she was just being a kid. I stayed quiet. But then, he rubbed the back of his neck. I realized I didn't hate the idea. Neither of us spoke. Rain still fell softly outside. I don't mean tomorrow, he quickly added, or next month. I'm not asking you to make some huge decision. He looked almost nervous. He searched for the words. I've spent months pretending this is only friendship because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Losing another person I love. The sentence settled gently between us. He looked directly into my eyes. I love Sarah. I always will. I nodded. I know. But loving her, he smiled sadly, didn't stop my heart from making room for someone else. Emotion tightened my chest. I didn't plan for that. You don't have to apologize. I'm not. His voice became steadier. I'm telling you because you deserve honesty. I took one slow step toward him. You've always given me honesty. I want to keep doing that. So do I. There were only inches between us now. Nicholas looked uncertain. If this is too soon, it isn't. If you don't feel the same, I do. His eyes widened slightly. You do? I smiled. I think I started falling for you the day you knocked on my door with that broken stroller. He laughed quietly. I knew asking for help was a good idea. It was a terrible stroller. It really was. We both laughed. Then the laughter faded. Neither of us moved. Neither of us looked away. Nicholas lifted one hand slowly, resting it gently against my cheek, giving me every chance to step back. I didn't. Instead, I closed the remaining distance. Our first kiss was soft, careful, unhurried. Not the kind born from months of hidden tension exploding all at once. The kind built from trust, from countless cups of coffee, from playgrounds, hospital rooms, cookie baking, three-legged races, late-night conversations. When we finally pulled apart, neither of us spoke immediately. Nicholas rested his forehead against mine. I've wanted to do that for a while, I smiled. So have I. Then we both started laughing. What? He asked. We waited months. We really did. He shook his head. I guess nothing went the way I expected. No. It turned out better, he smiled. I think you're right. The rain continued outside, but for the first time, it felt like we were finally walking toward the same future. The funny thing about finally kissing someone you've been thinking about for months is that life doesn't suddenly become simple. If anything, it becomes wonderfully, terrifyingly real. Nicholas and I stood in my hallway for another minute, smiling like two complete idiots. So, I said. So, we kissed. We definitely did, I laughed. You sound surprised. I am. He rubbed the back of his neck, smiling to himself. I haven't kissed anyone in almost 6 years. The smile faded from my face. That must feel strange. It does. He looked at me carefully, but not wrong. He reached for my hand again. It feels peaceful. I squeezed his fingers. I was hoping you'd say that. Before either of us could say anything else, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and immediately smiled. Emma? Everything okay? My sister's staying with her. He answered the call. Hey, Bug. I could hear Emma's tiny voice through the speaker. Daddy? Yeah? You come home? I'm on my way. A pause. Henry there? Nicholas looked at me and smiled. He is. Another pause. Tell him good night. Nicholas laughed. You can tell him yourself tomorrow. I will. He hung up. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Then he smiled. I should go. I know. He hesitated. Can I kiss you goodbye? You don't have to ask. This kiss was even gentler than the first. Comfortable, like we'd already started building something that didn't need to be rushed. The next morning I wondered if things would feel awkward. They didn't. At exactly 9 o'clock, someone knocked. I opened the door. Emma stood there holding a plate of pancakes. Daddy burned breakfast. Nicholas, standing behind her, sighed dramatically. I slightly overcooked breakfast. She looked at me. They black. They were enthusiastic. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the plate. Nicholas shrugged. I panicked. You've survived raising a child by yourself. I know. But pancakes defeated me. Emma tugged on my sleeve. You come eat? I looked at Nicholas. He smiled. I was hoping you would. Nothing about the morning felt different. And somehow, everything did. We decided not to tell Emma immediately. Not because we wanted to hide anything. Because we wanted to be certain. Neither of us wanted to confuse her with something that wasn't real. So we took our time. We went on actual dates, dinner after Emma fell asleep while Lisa babysat, walks through the neighborhood, coffee shops on Saturday mornings. The strange thing was, very little changed. We'd already become best friends. Now we simply held hands while we talked. Sometimes Nicholas would reach for me without thinking. Sometimes I'd catch him smiling at me from across the room for no reason at all. Those tiny moments somehow meant more than grand romantic gestures ever could. 3 months later, just after Christmas, Emma solved the problem for us. We'd spent the afternoon decorating cookies. Again. The kitchen looked exactly as disastrous as before. Nicholas had frosting on his nose. Emma noticed first. Daddy? What? She giggled. You messy. He wiped his face. Better? No. I laughed. You're making it worse. He looked at me helplessly. You fix it. I stepped closer and brushed the frosting away with my thumb. And when I looked back up, Emma was staring at us, very seriously. Uh-oh. She crossed her arms. I knew it. Nicholas blinked. Knew what? She smiled. You like Henry? Silence. Complete silence. Then she looked at me. And Henry likes Daddy. I glanced toward Nicholas. Neither of us had prepared for this conversation. Nicholas crouched beside her. Sweetheart, she interrupted him. You hold hands. Sometimes? You smile funny. I failed to hold back a laugh. Nicholas looked at me. Apparently we smile funny. Emma nodded proudly. I not little. No, Nicholas admitted, you're not. She looked between us again. So, another pause. Henry, my family? My heart nearly stopped. Nicholas looked at me first. Not because he needed permission, because we were doing this together. I nodded. He turned back to Emma. If Henry wants to be. She immediately looked at me. I do. She smiled so brightly that it felt like sunshine. Then she threw her arms around both of us at once. I knew. Nicholas laughed. How? She shrugged. You always happy now? Neither of us had an answer for that, because she was right. Spring arrived with warm afternoons and blooming trees. One Saturday morning, I carried the last of my moving boxes across the lawn, not because anyone had rushed me, not because anyone expected it, because it felt like the right time. Nicholas met me at the front door. You sure? I smiled. I've never been more sure. He kissed my forehead before taking one of the boxes. Welcome home? Inside, Emma came running down the hallway. You live here now? I do. She grabbed my hand. I show you your shelf. My shelf? And bathroom? I laughed. I get a bathroom shelf? You family. She said it as though it explained everything. Maybe it did. Life never became perfect. Nicholas still had difficult days when he missed Sarah. Sometimes he'd sit on the porch after Emma had gone to sleep. He never hid those moments from me, and I never tried to erase them. I'd simply sit beside him. Sometimes we'd talk, sometimes we'd just watch the stars. Love wasn't about replacing someone, and never had been. It was about making room. Room for memories. Room for healing. Room for laughter returning when you thought it never could. A year later, we were back at the preschool's family picnic. The same playground, the same races, the same teachers. Emma insisted on entering the three-legged race again. This time, Nicholas and I competed as a team. When we crossed the finish line first, Emma screamed loud enough for the entire park to hear. That's my dad's! People clapped. Nicholas looked at me. I looked at him. Neither of us corrected her, because neither of us wanted to. As we walked home, Emma skipped between us, holding both our hands. She looked up with a grin. I told you. Told us what? Nicholas asked. The stroller broke. We both laughed. It did? She smiled proudly. If it didn't? She squeezed our hands. You never meet. Nicholas caught my eye. I smiled. She was right. The quiet single dad next door had asked me for help fixing a broken stroller. Nothing had gone according to plan. And looking back, neither of us would have changed a single thing.